The other day, I was working down in Floyd County, Georgia, in northwest Georgia, at a house in a little subdivision. And next door to me, there was a family outside. It was a grandfather, probably about his early or mid-60s. Perhaps his son, I would assume maybe his youngest son. A boy of about high school age, probably a sophomore, maybe a junior in high school. He had on the football sweats. He played football for the local high school there. And then there was a young, blonde-headed boy, about 4 or 5 years old. And they were out there in the yard playing football, kicking field goals actually. The grandfather and his son had set up a small field goal. It was very small. The crossbar only probably came up to my chest. Had a couple of the poles. Small field goal. And this family, they were having a really good time. The young boy was having an absolute blast. And he was good at kicking field goals. His grandfather would kneel there on the ground. The high school, his son, the high schooler, would snap the ball back to him. He'd put the ball on the ground, and his young grandson would come up and kick it. And I watched him do this 3 or 4 times, and he never missed a one. And I yelled over there. I was like, "Son, you're gonna be the next kicker for the Georgia Bulldogs, aren't you?" And he started laughing and carrying on, and the grandfather's like, "Maybe, we'd hope so. That'd be really nice." And we talked for a second, and then the kid, the young boy, grabbed the football. He's like, "Hey, watch this." He chucked it. And to be honest, it was a pretty impressive throw for a 4 or 5-year-old. His grandpa caught the ball, and I was like, well, forget field goal kicking. We've got the next Tom Brady here. Kid got a real kick out of that, and the grandfather's like, "Hey, you never know, maybe. You never know." And, you know, this made me smile. It was heartwarming, you could say. What I seen here was something that was beautiful. It was something wholesome, something worth fighting for, something worth saving. This is going to be a different kind of video than normal. You see, I've been talking to my friend Patrick a whole lot here lately about Appalachian things. How our culture is being eroded. How everything that is happening to our people all across the world. You know, it's, I think of like South Africa, how things are, you know, well, let's just say there's a lot of heat down there. You see it in a lot of urban areas across this country. You see it in Europe, the migrant crisis over the last several years, the refugees. Here in Appalachia, we're kind of sheltered to a degree, but this sort of thing is just creeping in ever so incrementally. It's creeping in, and I've seen it just, we've both seen it in our lifetimes. You know, I like doing this, I like making videos and stuff, and I've met a lot of, I've came into contact with a lot of interesting people in the 2 years that I've been doing this. Some of them I've been lucky enough to meet in real life from different parts of the country here. So it's a good thing, but you know, at the end of the day, a lot of times I feel this sort of, this need to do more. This video here, the main part of it, this is just like the introduction. This is an idea that I had when we were talking the other night. You know, we are terribly behind here in Appalachia. Our cultures is being erased. Our people are being erased. Being poisoned by drugs, opiates, methamphetamine, shit like that. We are way behind. And he showed me some of these. There's a group on Twitter. There's a group on Twitter called the Trillbillies. A very degenerate, sort of leftist podcast. I was shocked to find that they have 43,000 followers on their Twitter page. They do a podcast, I believe, on SoundCloud. I've not listened to any of it. Probably will here soon. Then there's these NGOs, 2 of them off the top of my head that I can think of. One is called the Highlander Center. I believe it is based up here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And then there's one called Hood to Holler, which is based in eastern Kentucky, and it's headed by some black politician named Charles Booker. Hood to Holler. Let's bring the hood to your holler. It's a lot of this. These NGOs are working towards our erasure as heritage Appalachians. So me and my friend, we have decided we have to do something to counteract this degradation and debasement of our way of life. This video, the main part, is this idea that I've had. It's to make this presentation in real life. I'm not going to say how I'm going to get out there, and really, I don't know how to start such a thing, but I do have some ideas. The one idea that I have, I've just got to find a way to get in the doors, and I think I know how to do it. It's something that I hope to do in the next few months, hopefully. Because, you know, here in Appalachia, it seems like we're really deracinated, excuse me, in a lot of ways. And we have to fix this. And you have podcasts like the Trillbillies, you have these fucking NGOs doing everything they can to keep our people in the dark and to lie to them and say that this is progress. We're really behind here, and I don't care. Got to get the message out some way in real life. You know, I like doing this, but I mean, really, it's kind of all this online culture and stuff is just, it's not getting it done. I can't help but feel. You know, sometime I'd like to help maybe try to start some charitable organization and some cultural preservation organization for our people, for heritage Appalachians. And you know, this video, it's not just for Appalachians, it's for white people all across the world, for Native Europeans, because the same things are happening to you in some ways at an accelerated rate than it is happening here to us. This organization, I wouldn't say it would be overtly political. You know, I've said before, I'm sometimes skeptical of public-facing groups. And I do think that there is a place for, as my friend says, a sort of syndicate, sort of clandestine apparatus, you could say. I really do. I don't care if I'd have to get out and make soup and go up to my hometown, set up in a parking lot, and hand out food to people to try to get the message out. You know, this online thing, it kind of can't help but make you feel empty sometimes in a way, because, I mean, really, all I'm doing is making fucking videos. There's a need for, I feel like, for something more. But what you're about to watch is a very rough draft, an extremely rough draft It's just some ideas, and I'm trying to present it in a way to people that aren't aware of these sort of things. Any of you watching this, you already know a lot of these things, and I don't want to waste your time. If you've got something else to do, go ahead, absolutely. Because you know a lot of these things. I'm trying to put it out there in a way that's for us heritage Appalachians who are not aware, you could say. Here we're aware of race and stuff, but we're not aware of what is going on, what is the hidden hand that is driving a lot of this disastrous and terrible, like I said, degradation of our people and the erasure of our kind and our culture. I think we got some bad storms rolling in. I love it. I'll be done in a second. But, like I said, I'm just trying to present this in a way to people who aren't aware of these things. We've got to get the message out. And I want to do that in real life. As I said, it's a really rough draft. If I was to do this, if I was able to get my foot in the door, I'd be very much more prepared. I do all this unscripted. I would be very, very prepared. So it's pretty rough, typical video that I make. And I'd probably get my hair cut, shave, look presentable for the people that I'd be speaking to. And like I said, there will be some, I'd have to tailor the message, tweak the message. Hell, who knows, may end up getting run out of the building. But I don't think that's going to happen, because these people understand something's wrong, but they don't understand why it's wrong. But anyways, here you go. Dear mountain brothers and sisters, if you aren't aware, there is currently a war against our race, against our people, all across the world, from New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, our ancestral homelands in Europe, and also here, of course, in North America. And yes, we are also under attack here in rural Appalachia. All the different groups, nationalities of our people are under a subtle assault. The assault is happening in the media, in Hollywood, in academia, in the erasure of our kind and our cultures all across the world. And we are not immune. We're not immune from this here in Appalachia. While the effects of this war isn't really as prominent here as, say, it is in South Africa or Europe with the migrant crisis that started to occur 6 years ago, we do see what is happening here in Appalachia. We see it with our porous southern border, with the influx of these refugees from Mexico, Central America, these refugees who are starting to come here to our rural towns, and they are beginning to take jobs, blue-collar jobs, that white men used to do. This is all by design, of course. And they are aided and abetted by our government, all Western governments, by the media, by all of these groups. Also, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, play a key role in this. And once again, we are not immune to this here in Appalachia. Although the effects of, like I said, are not quite as prominent here, because after all, here in rural Appalachia, very, very strong white majority, usually above 95% in most counties, at least in the rural areas. all across Appalachia. However, there are insidious means of conducting warfare. By this I mean the destruction of the ties that bind us together, the destruction of the family unit, the promotion of globo-homo propaganda, the gay agenda, the encouragement by the media of miscegenation, of race mixing, which is a very destructive thing, because not only does it affect us, it affects the other races as well. You see, the powers that be, the elites, every commercial, every advertisement that you see nowadays is a black man and a white woman, or vice versa, some sort of mixed race couple and their children are promoted as the ideal family unit. You see, the powers that be, they want us to be mixed, all mixed together. You see, one thing I've learned over the last few years is that a lot of mixed race people they have a problem in knowing who they are and who they identify with, so they've got, an Asian parent and a white parent, or a black and white parent, or whatever. They do report saying that they feel at a loss in a way, confused about which side they truly belong to. Now, I've seen commonly leftists, Marxists, these internationalists. I've seen online where they say, oh, if you're feeling this way, you should create your own identity. Like they can just access some pre-packaged identity for their genetic makeup. This is wrong, this is false. You see, ethnogenesis does occur, but it takes many generations. In fact, could take centuries. We've seen that with, I guess what we could call the Latino race down in Central America and the Caribbean, South America. This took many centuries for them to have their own identity. So it's wrong and false to tell these people to create their own identity, because you're not capable of doing so in just one lifespan. It's a process and it takes much longer. You see this confusion that results from people being mixed race. The elites understand this, and they want this in order to create a more docile, more complacent, less intelligent, and confused populace. Basically the perfect serfs and slaves, you could say. This plan has been called the Kalergi Plan. I'm not going to go into that here because I want to keep this short. Look it up. If you look it up on Wikipedia, of course, it will say that it is a racist conspiracy theory. You will notice this trend as you look into these things. All the mainstream sources will label any facts, any questioning of the official prescribed narrative as racist and bigoted and even anti-Semitic. As heritage Appalachians, which is the title of this presentation, a letter to heritage Appalachians, unfortunately, we have been deracinated to a very strong degree. It goes also for a majority of our race. We have been deracinated. We have been told that we have white privilege. We have been told that we were evil, the scum of the earth, and that we are responsible for every ill, every evil, every injustice on earth. You see, if you are white, if you have any pride, anything resembling any sort of pride in your people, in your race, in your blood,
you will be deemed racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted, all these buzzwords. If you have any attempt at preserving your culture, your bloodline, if you want to have children that resemble you, and you wish the propagation of your kind, you will be deemed a Nazi and all these other anti-white terms. There is a reason for this, of course, because race matters. Race certainly matters if you are a minority here in these Western nations. If you are Jewish, if you are Black Lives Matter, that certainly matters, race. If you're Jewish and Zionism, race certainly matters. You know, but they want us to believe that we're just a social construct who has benefited on the depredation and looting of all these other races throughout history. As I said, there is a war on white people all across the world. We are hated by the powers that be, and by the endless hordes of migrants that they pump into our nations. And as heritage Appalachians, and by this term, I took this term from another term that I heard called heritage Americans, and it was describing the people from northern and northwestern Europe who helped settle this continent. You see, there's a couple of books here, and by the term heritage Appalachian, I mean people whose family has been here for at least 100 years, usually in most cases at least 200 to 300 years. You know, there was three racial, well, I should say ethnic groups, predominantly, who settled what was called during the colonial times as the frontier, especially the Southwestern frontier, which was here in East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, Virginia, and the territories that would follow after the annexation, after the colonies expanded, after the Revolutionary War. There was three ethnic groups that predominantly came here and settled these mountains that we call home today. They were the Germans. These Germans were usually from southern Germany, some also from northern Germany. These people were very industrious, very intelligent people, even-tempered, and very hard-working, as I said. The other two groups are related. There was the English, the Northern English, and also the Ulster Scot, which is more commonly known here in Appalachia as the Scotch-Irish. Now, these three groups, there's a saying here in Appalachia. Whenever these groups came over, the Germans, with their industrious skills, the beautiful barns that they built, it was said that the Germans would build a barn. The English, with their faith and bravery, were likely to build a church. And the Ulster Scot, with his fierce rambunctiousness, was more likely to build a moonshine still. There is a book that I'm going to show you here. It is called Conquest of a Continent. It was written in 1933 by an influential anthropologist by the name of Madison Grant. He also wrote this book in 1916, The Passing of the Great Race. To give a brief synopsis of the first book, Passing of the Great Race, in this book he looks at the anthropological history of what he classified as the three sub-races in Europe: the Nordic, the Alpine, and the Mediterranean. Some people would call Madison Grant a Nordicist. I'm not going to get into that here, although I will say my position on Nordicism has changed since I've started doing this. and it's a bit more complicated than what is commonly presented on the surface level to us. Now, some people, like I said, would call him a Nordicist. He did speak extremely highly of the Nordic man, the Nordic phenotype, as being explorers, conquerors, and industrious, honorable, loyal, and great leaders. While he did speak very highly of the Nordic race, he also, of course, gave credit to the Alpine race as being a sturdy people who were very hardworking. A lot of the southern Germans who came over here into the Appalachia, they were more of the Alpine phenotype with some Nordic. You see, these phenotypes, it's a little complicated to explain. You know, throughout history, of course, these three sub-races have intermixed and intermingled some. So, I mean, it's very rare to find, you know, I would imagine a pure Nordic or Alpine person today, purely. He also gives credit to the Mediterranean race for being extremely artistic and creative, and for having such a huge role in founding and operating some of the great historical civilizations. But in Conquest of the Continent, it is a racial history of all 50 states here in the United States. It even goes into detail about Central and South America as well. It was extremely interesting to read. And Madison Grant spoke extremely highly of the Southwestern Frontiersmen, our ancestors, who first came here to Appalachia. He spoke of the Germans' industrious capabilities. He spoke of the bravery of the English and the Ulster Scots. He also spoke of the fierce reputation of the Ulster Scot. And by the way, he considered the English and the Ulster Scot and the Northern Germans to be Nordic who came and settled here in Appalachia, largely of the Nordic phenotype. You see, he even writes in this book describing the Ulster Scots and the English as being a violent sort of people who came here to the southwestern frontier. They were an extremely violent people who were addicted to violence and killings. They were also a lawless people to a degree. You see, for centuries, these lowland Scots, the Ulster Scots, who came here and settled, had fought against the English along the English-Scottish border. This warring had went on for centuries, so the people that came here were battle-hardened, were robust, and could be very ruthless, which is what is required in order to take and hold a new territory. Now that we've talked a little bit about our people's racial history, we're going to focus now on the problems that are affecting heritage Appalachians today. Even the mainstream media, they will do this on occasion. Their biggest reasons for the situation in Appalachia is poverty and lack of education. While these two are problems, I really tend to dismiss the whole lack of education thing. I mean, after all, today in education, children are being taught, critical race theory to basically hate themselves, to instill this sense of white guilt into our youth. And, I mean, they're also teaching our children, that there's gender fluid and all these crazy, outlandish theories, claims. I don't see lack of education as being necessarily the most pressing problem. Now, poverty, that is a problem. There is a shortage of opportunities in rural Appalachia. And poverty is a real thing. However, while that is an issue, I do think that it is certainly not the most pressing issue. You see, we live in a very beautiful area. Really, there is nowhere like Appalachia, anywhere else in the world. Closest area I could think of would be the Ozarks over in southern Missouri and Arkansas. But there's really nowhere else like this area. What I see, and going back, previous generations, our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, largely they all were poor, you could say. They had to work very hard to earn a living. But you see, this resulted in a lot of self-reliance. You see, our people, our ancestors, have always been largely neglected, especially by the government. There's really only 2 instances that I can think of off the top of my head in which the government has shown a significant interest in Appalachia. One being the coal mining industry up in southwest Virginia, West Virginia, eastern Kentucky. And while the government was greatly interested in this resource, I mean, after all, the companies, the coal mining companies, they abused and exploited the coal miners for decades, many decades. Unsafe working conditions, and hell, they even paid them in what they called, I think, scrip, in which basically each little shanty town in Appalachia had a general store. You could only buy, they didn't even pay the coal miners cash. They had a general store that provided all the goods that the miners needed. See, they were just viciously exploited. And this often came to blows a few times. Things got very heated, resulting in deaths, revolts, things of that nature. See, the government just exploited these coal miners. Now, here in eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, northwest Alabama, we have the Tennessee Valley Authority. Myself, I have mixed feelings about the TVA. I sure do enjoy fishing in the lakes that were formed from the hydroelectric dams. I sure do enjoy that, fishing in these lakes and rivers, as does many people enjoy it for boating or, tourism and things. And I have to say, the TVA does provide us with power. But looking at the formation of the TVA by Franklin Delano Roosevelt back in the 1930s, it was this sort of, you could say, communist type action. While it did provide jobs to this area, it also, opened the door to a lot of things. In fact, the coal production up north of us, and electricity, and, the work that was done at Oak Ridge, I thoroughly believe that the atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan were destined for our racial kin in Germany. However, the war ended earlier, and they wanted to test these weapons out. Anyways, this, and also the effect of the TVA in modernizing parts of rural Appalachia. As I see it, technology and modernity, yes, it does provide some good things for us, but it's also removed us from, a simpler way of life, and it's opened the door to a lot of the horrors that we see today through mass media and various forms of indoctrination. Now, while poverty is a problem, I don't see it as, the #1 problem. What I see as the #1 problem affecting Appalachia really is the destruction of community. But feminism being a huge one, taking the mother out of the home in order to make her labor. It makes the elites wealthier. We pay the government more taxes. They can pay the men a lower wage because women are now entering the workforce. This also takes the mother away from the home, resulting in the children, having to go rely on daycare or more so on public school. And, that's just an opportunity to indoctrinate the children. You also have the proliferation of, promiscuity among spouses, resulting in broken homes, Not only that, there's also the, like I mentioned earlier, the homosexual propaganda. I've seen that creep in greatly just in my lifetime. Just in my lifetime. Even here in rural Appalachia. Sometimes I'm surprised that I haven't seen, you know, someone trying to get drag queen story hours started at one of the local public libraries in some of our larger towns here in rural Appalachia. I'm sure it's probably happened somewhere, but to my knowledge, at least, thankfully, it's not happened here yet. And one of the last things, and one of the biggest problems as I see it, that faces us heritage Appalachians is drug abuse. You see, back in 1996, Purdue Pharmaceuticals produced Oxycontin and promoted it heavily in the medical industry for doctors to write prescriptions. Oxycontin, in case you don't know, is a powerful opiate, painkiller, powerful narcotic, and its proliferation in the late 90s through the 2000s resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths across the United States. The biggest, by far the biggest percentage of these deaths were white people. You see, Purdue Pharmaceutical was owned by a family by the name of Sackler. The Sacklers, they may look white, but they are not. They are of that small, very small, yet immensely powerful and influential minority. You know, it's like they seem to know something. They knew that this was going to be a hit. And it's resulted in so many deaths, hundreds of thousands, over the years. You know, it's very tragic. I mean, how often do you see, even here in rural communities, the destruction brought on by drug abuse? How often do you see children being raised by their grandparents because their parents are in jail, perhaps prison, or they're just, to put it bluntly, too sorry to have anything to do with their children? It's a very vicious cycle, and it's terrible. It's horrible. You also see there is a significant methamphetamine problem here in rural Appalachia. You know, I know these things. I once lived that life. Did for many years. I was a drug addict. I liked my methamphetamine. I was a criminal and I was a thief. I was in and out of jail. Somehow, a small miracle, I never made it to prison. But I've been clean for 3 years, and I have seen the destruction firsthand, as I'm sure that many of you have, whether directly, through a member of your family, or indirectly. And you know, drug abuse does not, you know, back when I was into these things, I was very selfish, and I thought, you know, what I was doing was just affecting me. It wasn't until later on I started to see that it was putting a lot of strain on my family. It was separating me from them, and you know, it's just a vicious cycle. And not only that, but it affects the whole community. You know, crime goes up, theft, larceny, all these things. It affects the whole community. And really, there's no way to... The government, you know, doesn't do anything to help these people. In fact, you know, they promote, you know, these other sort of, I think of, you know, Suboxone or Subutex, these sort of things, methadone, in order to get addicts clean. But, you know, this usually doesn't work. You know, I think these people, these addicts, they need compassion, but they also, we should be willing to help them, absolutely, and support them. But we also have to bear in mind, too, that they have to be willing to help themselves. You know, it's a two-way street. We have to work to meet each other in the middle. But you see, methamphetamine is promoted. I mean, all this drug abuse is promoted in media, in the Hollywood. They make this lifestyle seem glamorous. Perhaps you can get rich dealing drugs, all of these sort of things. They also, where was I going with this? I've lost my train of thought. Excuse me. But you see, the methamphetamine here is largely produced in Mexico, and it is brought over the southern border through cartels. And, you know, hell, the government has a hand in this. You know, it's a two-sided thing. The DEA, they have a hand in it. All these things. I mean, hell, we've caught the CIA before. I think it was during Iran-Contra. You know, they were caught smuggling cocaine, being involved in it. You see, it's a concentrated effort against our race. Absolutely. We have no one in our corner. You know, a lot of these nationalist groups, these more mainstream nationalist groups, organizations, I think they tend to also ignore us here in Appalachia. They ignore heritage Appalachians. I've often thought why this is, and honestly I think it's possibly because they view us as, you know, a lot of stereotypes tend to portray heritage Appalachians as being uneducated, unenlightened, uncouth, and really just hillbillies, a bunch of dumb hicks. You see, and there's a lot of people in some of these online dissident nationalist spheres. I think they look over us because they see us as these stereotypes. They don't see anything that is great and academically enlightening coming out of Appalachia, coming from our people. Now, I see a lot of people in these spheres. They compare and contrast these different governmental ideologies. They talk about, you know, fascism, National Socialism. They can compare and contrast it to, you know, Strasserism or communism, National Bolshevism, all these different ideologies. While this is interesting, and there is a time and place for it, of course, and while I myself, I'm not a particularly academically inclined person. I like to read things, I like to research things. I have to admit, sometimes I'm a little scatterbrained in my research and reading because I have many interests and I'm not the best at managing my time. I've read some Nietzsche, I've read some Evola, but I've never finished any of their works. Hopefully sometime in the future I can. But if not, I do have some practical knowledge on things. And you see, that's what I think a lot of our guys fail to see, is that whenever things come to push and shove, as they will, and as we should hope that they will, because as I see it, and many others, there's really no way out of this until things must get worse before they have any chance of getting better. But when things come to push and shove, I don't care how much Evola, how much Nietzsche you can quote. When push comes to shove, that's not going to save you. And when push comes to shove, I would rather be right here in rural Appalachia than anywhere else in this country. I'd rather be here. Because the people here, these heritage Appalachians, although they may be not very well read, not particularly well educated, the people here, they have practical knowledge, they have practical skills, they have pragmatic solutions for precarious situations. They're self-reliant to a strong degree. Probably, there's really no comparison from a rural Appalachian to some of these more urbanite people. These urbanite leftists, hell, even some of these urbanite, you know, what I would call right-wing bugmen. You know, they do exist. It's unfortunate, but they do. You see, I would rather be right here because they have practical skills, practical knowledge, and I think that's something that a lot of us should focus on acquiring more of. And like I said, I'm not saying this to, you know, belittle, you know, research and a lot of this academic focus, but we got to bear in mind that that isn't going to save you. and that you need to have, and I mean, what use is all this knowledge if you can't apply it? It's just trivial knowledge. It's trivia. It's trivia. You need practical skills, practical knowledge. So what I would propose as a way of helping us heritage Appalachians, and by extension, all of the other ethnicities, white ethnicities, Native European ethnicities, not just here in the United States, but up in Canada, Europe, all across the world. What I would propose as something that would help us is the creation of this organization, you could say. I'm not sure what, we could name this organization. I think Heritage Appalachia is an outstanding name. This organization would serve as a way of preserving our culture here in Appalachia, the culture of our forefathers, a culture of self-reliance, a culture of being independent, because we need to work to be independent of the system to the best of our abilities. I mean, after all, we're not free yet. I work, you work, we pay taxes that fund our own replacement, that funds the indoctrination of our youth. If we could break free of this, it would be a serious blow to the system, a system that hates us. And it's a system that enslaves us and uses us up and casts us into the trash pile. Poisons our youth with drugs, all of these things. You see, if this organization could be a cultural preservation organization, hold festivals. We do have some festivals here. We need more. This organization will also work as a charitable organization. This organization, I don't see it being an overtly political organization. Because we need help. Like I said, we're neglected by the government. We're neglected even by what I would consider our guys. We truly are. And this is a shame. And it's really a glaring oversight by some of the more prominent groups in these dissident spheres. Because they don't understand. The people here in rural Appalachia are extremely loyal. And any help they receive, they would be extremely grateful. And this is something that I think is a glaring oversight, and it's a folly. It's a mistake on their behalf. I'm going to end this video here. It's quite long already. Yeah, these are just some thoughts that I've had about trying to do something in real life to help the people of rural Appalachia. I don't know, like I said, I've got some ideas of how to possibly get this message out in real life. We'll see what happens. I'm going to have to try something, And I think all of us, no matter what part of the world or which nation, which continent we are in, should be trying to do the same thing, if we can. I know we all work and have a lot of stuff going on, but I feel compelled to try to do something like this. I know I was talking a lot about, neglect and all that. I thoroughly believe that our people here and the people in your local community, I absolutely believe that we have to help ourselves before we can attempt to help others. God helps those who help themselves, or the gods help those who help themselves. I believe this completely. I also believe that in a lot of instances we make our own luck. Anyways, apologize again that this video was so long. It was just something different. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.